The chamber fell silent as Queen Elena Torres walked to the center of the Galactic Council floor. 200 alien delegates from across known space watched her with expressions ranging from curiosity. The crystalline walls of the council station refracted light from a dozen nearby stars, casting rainbow patterns across faces that bore scales, fur, chitin, and forms humanity still struggled to categorize. Elena wore no crown. She needed none. The simple black uniform of the Human Defense Force carried more weight than any ceremonial gold ever could. 3 stars sat on her collar, 3 years of war etched into the lines around her eyes. The Archon of the Sci-Fi collective rose from his seat, his 4 arms spreading wide in a gesture of accusation. "Queen Torres, you stand here to answer for crimes against galactic law. Your species has sent military forces into no fewer than 7 Doomworlds. These zones have been forbidden for 3,000 years. Forbidden because they are death itself. What madness drives humanity to throw soldiers into places where even our greatest warriors perish?" Elena met his gaze without flinching. "Archon Valthen, I request permission to show rather than tell." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Archon's head tilted, his sensor stalks quivering. "You wish to present evidence?" "I wish to present truth," Elena said. She raised one hand, and a holographic display materialized above the council floor. "I ask only that you watch. Afterward, if you still believe humanity has committed crimes, I will accept whatever judgment you decree." The Archon settled back into his seat. "Proceed." The hologram shifted, expanding until it filled the center of the chamber. Static cleared to reveal a landscape that made several delegates recoil. Rivers of molten rock carved through fields of black volcanic glass. The sky burned orange with ash and toxic gases. Temperature readings scrolled across the bottom of the image, 200 degrees Celsius in the shade. Radiation levels that would cook most organic tissue in hours. Karak 7. The first Doomworld humanity entered. Your records call it the Furnace of Verath, home to the insectoid swarms that have repelled every military expedition for 600 years. 14 species have sent forces here. 14 species have watched their soldiers die, screaming as the Verath pulled them underground to be consumed alive. The hologram zoomed in. Human soldiers moved through the hellscape in groups of 6, their armor gleaming with heat-resistant plating. They didn't run. They didn't panic. They moved with purpose, scanning the ground, communicating through hand signals when the toxic atmosphere interfered with their radios. A delegate from the Corvian Empire stood abruptly. "This is suicide. Why would..." The ground beneath the human squad erupted. Verath warriors surged upward, each one 3 meters of segmented chitin and razor mandibles. The lead soldier went down, torn from his team before he could scream. The others didn't retreat, they attacked. Plasma fire tore through the Verath ranks at point-blank range. One human soldier threw herself between her squadmate and a lunging warrior, taking the impact on her reinforced shoulder guard before driving a combat blade into the creature's sensory cluster. Another released a canister that exploded into silver mist, the same toxic compound the Verath used to paralyze prey, now weaponized and turned against them. The Verath retreated underground. The humans pursued. "No," breathed the Corvian delegate. "They're following them into the tunnels. That's where the swarms are strongest. That's where everyone dies." Elena's voice remained steady. "That's where humans hunt." The hologram followed the squad into darkness. Helmet cameras provided the only light. The tunnel walls pulsed with living chitin. Verath warriors filled every passage, skittering across walls and ceiling with terrifying speed. The humans formed a tight defensive formation, back to back, firing in controlled bursts. When ammunition ran low, they switched to blades. When their armor cracked from the heat and the acid spray of dying Verath, they kept fighting. One soldier fell, then another. But the rest pushed deeper, planting charges on structural supports, collapsing tunnels behind them to prevent reinforcements from arriving. They turned the Verath's own territory into a grave. When the final human soldier emerged from the tunnel network 3 hours later, covered in burns and bleeding from a dozen wounds, She carried the dog tags of her fallen comrades in one hand, and a Vareth Queen's severed head in the other. The council chamber had gone completely silent. Elena gestured, and the hologram shifted to a new scene. Valter, 9. Your records call it the Shadow Moon. Perpetual darkness. Temperature negative 150 degrees Celsius. Home to the Shroud. A telepathic entity that drives other species to madness within hours of exposure. The Shroud has claimed 18,000 soldiers from 7 different civilizations over the past millennium. They all broke. They all tore out their own throats or shot their companions or simply wandered into the ice until they froze. The new footage showed human soldiers establishing a forward base in absolute darkness. Their lights created small islands of visibility in an ocean of black. And then the Shroud came. It appeared as shadows within shadows. Whispers that weren't sound. A presence that pressed against the mind like drowning. The first human soldier to encounter it directly collapsed, screaming. His companions didn't abandon him. They surrounded him, speaking in calm voices, reminding him of his name, his home, his reasons for fighting. They held him until the episode passed. Then they did something no other species had attempted. They walked toward the Shroud deliberately. What are they doing? The question came from a Quellan diplomat, her voice tight with horror. Learning, Elena replied. The Shroud is telepathic, but it has patterns, weakness. Every encounter taught our soldiers more about how it operates. They discovered it feeds on isolation and fear, so they refused to give it either. The hologram showed 47 days of brutal psychological warfare. Humans developed mental exercises, shared techniques for resisting the telepathic assault, rotated soldiers out before exposure could cause permanent damage. They lost people. The footage showed memorial services in the ice, names carved into frozen monuments. But the survivors grew stronger. They adapted. On the 47th day, something unprecedented happened. The Shroud retreated. A shockwave of disbelief swept through the council chamber. Several delegates rose from their seats in protest. Impossible, stated the Archon. The Shroud has never retreated. Never. Your footage must be falsified. Elena's expression didn't change. I have 73 independent verification sources, including real-time data streams recorded by your own deep space monitoring stations. The Shroud retreated because for the first time in its existence, it encountered a force that wouldn't break no matter how much pressure it applied. Humans have something your species seem to have forgotten. We remember that impossible simply means no one has done it yet. She paused, letting the weight of that sink in. You want to know why the Doomworlds fear human armies? Because we don't see them as death traps to be avoided. We see them as problems to be solved. Every species here looks at a Doomworld and asks, how do we survive? Humans look at the same Doomworld and asks, how do we win? A delegate from the Threnian Accord leaned forward, but at what cost? How many soldiers have you lost in these campaigns? Elena's jaw tightened. 3,412. I know every name, every face, every family we had to notify. You sacrificed thousands for territory that serves no strategic purpose, the Threnian continued. This is reckless, wasteful, the actions of a species that values glory over wisdom. No. Elena's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. The actions of a species that values survival over comfort. She triggered a new holographic display, intelligence reports, sensor data, classified information that made several council members gasp in recognition. 18 months ago, human intelligence operatives discovered something your governments have known for decades but chose to suppress. The entities in the Doomworlds aren't contained. They're preparing. The Vareth were breeding. The Shroud was expanding its territory. Across every Doomworld, the threats you've avoided for centuries are gathering strength, and they were planning to spread. The Archon sensor stalk stiffened. That information is classified. That information, Elena interrupted, is a death sentence for every living being in this galaxy if we ignore it. You've known for decades that the Doomworlds wouldn't stay dormant forever. You've had intelligence reports, projections, warning signs. And what did this council do? You buried them. You declared the zones forbidden and pretended that would be enough. You chose denial because facing the truth required sacrifice you weren't willing to make. She swept her gaze across the assembled delegates. Humanity didn't enter the Doomworlds for glory. We didn't do it for territory. We did it because someone had to, and we were the only ones willing to pay the price. Every human soldier who died on Carrick, 7 bought you time. Every soldier who held the line on Valtor, 9 kept the shroud from reaching your colonies. We bled so you wouldn't have to. A long silence stretched across the chamber. Finally, an insectoid delegate from the Chitterish Dominion rose. Her voice carried the clicking harmonics of her language through the translation matrix. You speak of sacrifice as if it is noble, but what you describe sounds like death worship. You throw your people into meat grinders and call it strategy. Elena turned to face her directly. We throw our people into battles that need to be fought. There's a difference. Every human who volunteered for the Doomworld campaigns knew the risks. They went anyway because they understood something fundamental. Waiting for perfect safety is the same as waiting to die. The galaxy has spent 3,000 years avoiding the Doomworlds, hoping the problem would solve itself. It didn't. It grew worse. Humanity chose action over hope. She called up new footage. 7 different Doomworlds. 7 campaigns of brutal, grinding warfare. Humans fighting in environments that would kill most species in minutes. Adapting to enemies that had remained undefeated for centuries. Losing soldiers, learning from their deaths, and pushing forward anyway. On Earth, Elena continued, we have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. You are good people. Every species in this chamber has contributed beauty and wisdom to galactic civilization. But when faced with existential threats, you chose to do nothing. You hoped the monsters would stay in their cages. Humans don't hope. We act. The Archon's voice carried a new tone. Not hostility, but something closer to understanding. You're telling us that humanity has been protecting the galaxy for 3 years, and we condemned you for it. I'm telling you that humanity has been doing what needed to be done, regardless of whether anyone appreciated it or even knew about it. But we can't finish the job alone. 5 Doomworlds remain, each one more dangerous than the last. The entities there have had 3,000 years to grow strong. They won't fall easily. We need resources, supply lines, medical support, intelligence sharing. Elena's expression hardened. I'm not here to ask for your gratitude. I'm here to demand your help. Because the threats in those remaining Doomworlds won't stop at forbidden boundaries. When they break containment, and they will, they'll sweep across every colony, every homeworld, every place you've declared safe. And on that day, you'll wish you'd supported the humans who are willing to fight. The council chamber erupted in debate. Delegates argued in a dozen languages, their translation matrices creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Some demanded humanity be punished regardless. Others called for immediate support. The Archon raised all 4 arms, calling for order. This council will vote, he declared, all in favor of condemning humanity's actions and demanding immediate withdrawal from the Doomworlds. 17 delegates raised their affirmation signals. 17 out of 200. All in favor of supporting humanity's campaign with full resource allocation and strategic cooperation. 163 delegates signaled approval. The rest abstained. The Archon looked at Elena with something that might have been respect. Queen Torres, the Galactic Council hereby authorizes full military and logistical support for humanity's Doomworld operations. We will coordinate our resources with your defense force, and we will remember that when the galaxy needed someone brave enough to walk into the darkness, humanity stepped forward. Elena nodded once, sharp and precise. We didn't do it for recognition, Archon. We did it because it needed to be done. That's what humans do. We see the impossible, and we make it possible. We face the darkness, and we bring light. Not because we're fearless, we're terrified. But we refuse to let fear decide what we're capable of achieving. She turned to leave, then paused at the threshold of the chamber. The Doomworlds fear human armies because we taught them something they'd never learned before. We taught them that human beings don't break. We bend, we adapt, we endure, and eventually we win. every single time. The council chamber remained silent as Elena walked out. Through the crystalline walls, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere among them, 5 Doomworlds waited, their ancient horrors preparing for battles they believed they'd already won. They didn't understand humanity yet, but they would learn. On Earth, volunteers were already lining up for the next deployment. Young soldiers who'd heard the stories from Carrick, 7, and Valtort, 9. Who knew exactly what they were signing up for and chose to go anyway. Because that's what humans did when monsters needed fighting, and no one else would step forward. They picked up their weapons, said goodbye to their families, and walked into hell. Not because they wanted to die, because they refused to let others die in their place. The Galactic Council would provide support now. Resources would flow. Supply lines would be established. But Elena knew the truth that she'd never spoken aloud in that chamber. Even with support, the remaining Doomworlds would be nightmares. Even with every advantage, human soldiers would die in numbers that would make the previous campaigns look gentle. And humanity would fight anyway, because 3,000 years ago the galaxy had looked at these threats and declared them unconquerable. They'd drawn boundaries and hoped that would be enough. But hope wasn't strategy. Fear wasn't wisdom, and running from the darkness only gave it room to grow. Humans had learned that lesson on Earth, fighting through ice ages and plagues and wars that should have ended their species. They'd learned it in the dark between stars, pushing outward when every other civilization looked inward. And they'd learned it in the Doomworlds, where the only difference between victory and extinction was the willingness to pay any price for survival. The galaxy was learning it now. Watching footage of human soldiers standing firm against horrors that made their own warriors flee. They were learning that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or numbers. It was stubbornness, the bone-deep refusal to accept defeat. The ability to look at certain death and say, "Not today, not ever." Elena reached her transport ship. Her advisors waited inside, already preparing briefings for the next campaign. 5 Doomworlds remained. 5 impossible battles. 5 chances for humanity to prove once again that impossible was just another word for something no one had accomplished yet. She looked back at the council station one last time. Through those crystalline walls, 200 species were learning to see humanity differently, not as reckless warmongers or death worshippers, as the soldiers willing to stand on the wall. The ones who walked into darkness so others could stay in the light. That was humanity's role in this galaxy. Not the smartest species, not the strongest, not the oldest or the wisest, but the ones who would fight when fighting seemed hopeless. The ones who would endure when endurance seemed impossible. The ones who looked at a Doomworld and saw not a grave, but a battlefield to be won. And the Doomworlds were learning to fear that, learning that human armies didn't come to die. They came to conquer. They came with the lessons learned from 3,412 fallen soldiers. They came with the determination of a species that had survived everything Earth and the cosmos had thrown at them. They came to win. Elena boarded her ship. Behind her, the Galactic Council continued its deliberations, allocating resources and drawing up strategic plans. Ahead of her, 5 Doomworlds waited in the darkness. And between her and those impossible battles stood thousands of human soldiers who'd volunteered knowing they might never come home. She'd lead them anyway, because that's what humans did. They faced the darkness together, refusing to let fear decide their fate. They walked into hell with their eyes open and their weapons ready. And they didn't stop until the monsters learned to fear them back. The galaxy was beginning to understand. But the Doomworlds would learn the lesson more thoroughly. They'd learn it in fire and blood and the unyielding determination of a species that had looked at 3,000 years of failure and said, "Watch us do it anyway." They'd learn why Doomworlds fear human armies, because humanity didn't just fight to survive, they fought to win. And they never, ever stopped.